Hi, and welcome, guys, to another exciting pirate news where we have myself, Jamie, Malt, and Desmond here in order to really bring you some of the current issues that are popping up for you, all pirates out there. Of course, me being your wonderful quartermaster of the Massachusetts Party, and we got Jamie, the captain, Malt, the Lord Master, and Desmond, our new up and coming champion. So. Uh, right up on today's topics that we want to talk about was the European Parliament elections are coming up real soon. Jamie, could you give us a little bit more on that?
Sure. The European Parliament elections are May 24th through the 26th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. In each country is on a different day, if I recall correctly. The Pirates are competing in those elections, especially in the Czech Republic, which they're likely to do very well. Germany, Luxembourg, France, and plenty of other countries. So we're anticipating that the number of pirates in the European Parliament is going to go up, but we just want to urge anyone who's watching this to tell your friends who are in Europe, or if you can vote in the European Parliament elections, to vote pirate, and make sure that the pirates do very well in that election.
I mean, a lot of votes means we get to take on a lot of the challenges and problems that are facing us this day. So your support is definitely needed. Even just a quick tweet would be appreciated. And speaking of issues, we have the Manning topic to definitely go over. Well, it was the sentencing, right, gentlemen?
No, not sentencing. Chelsea Manning went before a grand jury like she had done before. And she was recently released when that grand jury ended. But now they're back. They have impaneled another grand jury, and she's refusing to testify. And they've thrown her in jail if she doesn't. I think they've got a fine on her after 30 days that doubles after 60 days for every day.
It's $500 every day for the first 30, and then $1,000 every day after 60.
Thanks, Malt. So she's in jail for not being party to this Trumpian witch hunt against WikiLeaks. So we support her completely.
Yeah, it's frankly outrageous how Chelsea has been once again punished for refusing to cooperate, while you've got individuals in the Trump crime family and even his associates who are just thumbing their noses at the rule of law, at the democratic process. And it's outrageous. It's disgusting that no one on the right is, no one with the free speech movement is speaking out against this.
And definitely with the rule of law applying to everyone. I mean, doesn't she have a right to not speak in order to not incriminate herself?
Fifth Amendment, absolutely.
And isn't she have rights to the whole due process like everybody else?
Yes, she does.
So wouldn't that both fall under those two categories, at least in my opinion? Maybe not so much the due process, but at least the right to not incriminate oneself. So,
yeah, I mean, the judge is being heavy-handed, but as Malt was saying, recently the House demanded that Trump give over his tax returns, and basically, I think it was Munchin, his Treasury Secretary, said, "Nope, not going to do that," and that's a subpoena from Congress. So why is it okay for them to not adhere to a subpoena, but Chelsea Manning does?
Yeah, Eric Trump gets to negotiate what questions he has to answer about the lies he told to Congress. So that's gross.
Those who control the questions control the conversation. So, and it shouldn't be within his power to control the conversation from Congress. A congressperson should be allowed to ask whatever they need to do in order to bring the truth to light. So, that's part of their job, is to make sure the rule of the land is intact. And I've seen a lot of degradation upon what's really going on with the Congress and their rights, and the president thumbing the nose up at them. And we should really, really fight to put that back on lockdown.
But going forward, we'll link in the description how people can support Chelsea Manning, and we expect there'll be protests coming up as well. Which
I mean, how much of a crime with her staying silent is there, really, to be honest? I mean, when it comes down to it, if it's not really hurting anybody else per se, then it shouldn't really be a crime. I mean, we should decriminalize a lot of different things.
Refusing to testify before a grand jury that's one of those fairly well established bits.
I mean, you should be allowed to refuse to testify at any point. That it is part of your individual autonomy, is it not?
Well, Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, I mean that's why that's there.
Right.
I mean, and again, going right into anything that's not a crime against anybody else because of your actions, I personally feel I'm against it. Going for, like, say, individual rights, like the red umbrella. So Desmond, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for to get that decriminalization of certain individual actions?
Well, in particular around sex work, and making very clear that we're talking about when people voluntarily go into sex work, go into providing it, and are not coerced or deceived in any way in order to do that. This is a sticking point because you have a large movement claiming to be fighting sex trafficking, but they're conflating consensual sex work with it. And we saw recently in the Metro West part of Greater Boston, a group of dog-walking moms decided to start an anti-sex trafficking group targeting massage parlors and spas in the area, which are overwhelmingly staffed by immigrants from East Asia. And so there are strong racist overtones on that. Plus the fact that this is triggered by the news of Robert Kraft's arrest. And going into that very briefly, we're seeing that the video has been suppressed because of questions about the legality of having police put in video cameras there for 6 months, claiming that there are trafficking victims, but without really proper authorization. And also equating what Kraft did with exploiting a trafficking victim, and automatically linking the women in these massage parlors and spas as being trafficked because, they're from East Asia, so they don't know what they're doing. It's a constant threat of that. And now you have these so-called anti-trafficking groups encouraging citizens like these people who formed a group organizing Neighbors Against Exploitation to engage in essentially misinformed vigilantism against massage parlors without really knowing what's going on. Even the police do not like that because it can interfere with whatever investigations they may be doing, even if it has nothing to do with sex work or sex trafficking. And if we had, this goes into the main point, if we had sex work decriminalized, it would make it much easier, not only in terms of that the police could go in to an established commercial sex business and say, everything's legal, everyone's consenting, okay, we'll leave you alone. But also many times consensual sex workers are the best allies for fighting actual trafficking. And so that's why the Pirate Party and many other groups have come to support decriminalization of sex work, and also to educate the public so that they're not doing what these dog walkers are doing out of blatant misinformation and emotional appeals, what would be called a moral panic.
I mean, really going into it, if you really decriminalize it, the only people who are gaining power by something that's part of the human condition is the criminals. And so it's just giving them a tool in order to gain resources. If we go ahead and bring it out into the light and bring it into the open, not only are people going to be less inclined to do that on the other hand, but it makes it safer for everybody. Absolutely safer for everybody. And I mean, we really are fighting for a more peaceful society. Mo, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I mean, it goes back to what everyone was saying when Backpage was shut down, is that if you take power out of the hands of the people doing the work, that's where you start getting exploitation. And it's just like in countries that have protections for sex workers, you don't see as much abuse. But we are driving folks into the shadows. We're driving folks into exploitation when they can't go to the police, when they can't ask for help. That's where exploiters have the upper hand.
Yeah, when you're the victim of violent crime and you have to plead the fifth just to get any help, that's not good in any way, shape, or form.
There have even been cases where sex workers come forward to report case of violent crime, whether against themselves or against someone involved in their industry, and they get arrested for prostitution or solicitation charges. How does that help anybody? It doesn't.
Solicitation to sell.
Right, right.
Like, I mean, you're allowed to sell so many different other things that are actually horrible for the human condition.
Right.
One of my favorites being sugar, liquid sugar. Actually bad for you, but that's completely okay.
Actually subsidized by the federal government.
See.
Getting back on the topic, to counter that, you look in New Zealand where they decriminalized in 2003. There are issues with that they haven't decriminalized migrant sex workers, but they're now re-examining that. But you have seen cases where police are partnering with sex workers to fight violent crime, where sex workers can sue for damages on harassment or other charges and win. And sex workers are even mobilizing with other labor groups to get things like the laws around 0-hour labor to be improved for the people doing that labor. And that's a positive example and a positive reason to go for decrim.
Yeah. And so really it just goes into, at least for me, individual autonomy and one's right to not have somebody else control their actions. And one of probably the biggest things for me, or whether and how we get there, is to make sure that we really make individual autonomy and individual sanctity, I think is the old term for it, really bring that back as a thing. Jamie, what are your thoughts on individual autonomy?
Well, you can't have a functioning democracy without individuals having individual rights over themselves, over their actions. And so, we've seen recently with, say, what's happening in Alabama and Georgia, where they're attempting to, in essence, make women second-class citizens, and potentially any woman who, for some of these laws, any woman who has an abortion, may even have a miscarriage. If they can turn that around and blame the woman who is pregnant, then they can jail these women. And we know in so many of these states, once you're jailed, you lose the right to vote. And so we as a functioning democratic society have to support women's rights and women's control over their body. I mean, if men want to be able to use Viagra to control their erection, then then women should have autonomy over their body to say when they want to carry a pregnancy to term or not.
Yeah, I think, like, getting to the laws themselves, they are written from a perspective of utter fantasy. I think it was Alabama's law that has a statute in it where if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy, where the zygote has implanted into the fallopian tubes rather than the uterus itself,
which is a threat to the life of the woman.
Absolutely.
Yeah, extremely dangerous. But the law is written as though you can take the zygote out of the fallopian tube and put it into the uterus, which is science fiction. It's utter nonsense. Women, women are under attack across the whole country. Like, if these laws stand in Alabama, in Georgia, they're going to be pushed to the Supreme Court, and they're going to be used as the foundation for an attack on Roe v. Wade nationwide. So, like, us, white male-looking individuals in Massachusetts, like, we're not safe. Our families aren't safe. Like, we cannot rest on the laurels of living in New England and just assume that everyone's going to be fine, because the religious right has a game plan. They've got a playbook for bringing Christian theocratic fascism to America, and they're winning in a huge way.
I don't know. Personally, I don't think you should call them Christian, because everything I've read about Christianity is not what they're doing.
I mean, that's the word they're using.
Interesting point related to that. One of the people who came out and said that the Alabama law was too extreme was Pat Robertson of the 700 Club. Now, when he's saying it's too extreme,
well,
yes, mind blown.
Wait. Let's be clear about that. He said it was too extreme because he thought that it would go before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would not overturn Roe versus Wade because it was too extreme.
Well, I mean,
he still wants to get rid of Roe versus Wade.
All the little wins, though, of Roe versus Wade, and really going into the 14th Amendment, the one where we freed the slavery and we ended slavery, all those little clauses were wins in the point to individual autonomy. And so individual rights, and we haven't won that battle completely, but those were huge landmark victories in the sense that we really did right by our country.
Right, but still we then had 100 years of subjugation. So even with those, we still had subjugation.
We do. And
we're only now starting to get rid of. It's still not completely gone.
Yeah, no, and we've got slavery as a punishment for crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still do. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and we still have to fight. This fight is not quite over. Obviously, we still have work before us. But so long as we keep on making those forward correct steps, even if they're small, there are still steps in the right direction of having a better, freer country. Like voters' choice, one of my favorite topics to bring up. The right for us to actually get who we want in office and things of that nature.
And also to get people's votes heard, so that you're not looking at two lousy candidates and thinking that's the only choice I've got, where you can rank among, say, 5 candidates, and all the candidates then have to pay attention to what the other is saying so as not to alienate voters and to make sure that they can get the second or third preference votes. And also it brings in more voters to participate and to say their mind. And yes, it can bring third-party candidates in to legislatures and to other public offices. I say, great. We need more parties. We need to stop this idea of which rotten choice is going to have a slim majority in order to control things, and instead have, just as individuals working autonomously have to work together consensually to find common ground, we can have a multiplicity of parties as a result of voters' choice and other reforms working together in coalition like they do in many European countries to build a consensus and to focus more on facts than on particular ideology.
Of course, in Europe, just to get back to the European parliamentary elections, they have proportional representation. So if you get 5 or 10% of the votes, and you get 5 or 10% of the seats. And that's certainly something that, you look at Massachusetts, it's 80% Democrat in the legislature, and yet at the same time, you see that in the governor election, the Democrats aren't winning by those numbers. So the system, in a sense, is set up to disenfranchise. It disenfranchises pirates, Greens, Libertarians, but even Republicans, theoretically.
Even progressive Democrats are getting shut down by the DNC. like institution wide, there's absolutely a bias against leftist agitation in the Democratic Party, and I don't know who they think else is going to support them. Trump's got 90% approval rating among Republicans. We aren't going to peel Republicans away from him. Folks need to activate the left if they want to depose him.
Yeah. I mean, we really need to find a way to come back together and fight on some of these bigger issues, because we've had a lot of progress. We've had a lot of hiccups. And coming together as one solidified party again, and somehow, some way, to bridge that gap. So I would say probably the biggest issues we face are stopping the infighting and just trying to move forward.
I mean, it's not really infighting. The corporate donor wing of the Democratic Party pretty much has the entire organization by the balls. And like, as long as we've got Nancy Pelosi sabotaging any effort to move left from the inside,
that's why we're here.
Yeah,
because we work on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of which, we do have some stuff that we are doing coming up. So, Jamie, can you give us some of the details on that?
Sure. We just finished our, we're doing every month, we do a different meetup throughout the state. We just finished up the one in Somerville. Last month we had one in Worcester. Next month on June 22nd, we'll be at the Holyoke Public Library, 250 Chestnut Street, Holyoke, starting at around probably 11. And, you know, we'll be teaching people how to run for office. We'll be teaching people how to protect their privacy, and, you know, for Pirates there, coming up with our platform for the 2020 legislative elections, and making sure that we have a solid platform going in that represents the pirate perspective on the problems that we have today. Yes,
and we actually have somebody looking to really form up a neighboring state's pirate party as well, if I do recall. And we definitely want to show some love and support for neighboring parties, as well as our national committee as well. So yeah, it's certainly, you know, there's someone's come forth in Connecticut. There are pirates in other states, you know, one here, two there. New Hampshire is starting to get more active. So if folks want to come, you know, we're willing to drive out and talk with folks, you know, in Vermont, Rhode Island, certainly Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, to help them get started. Yeah, even some people down in Florida and stuff. So, I mean, well, I don't know if I'm going to fly down there. But we can always meet up online in order to do a hangout, do a Discord, do any number of things in order to get you guys some support. So definitely get in contact with Jamie, because he loves it when you get in contact with him. Woohoo. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming out today. We really do appreciate it. And we're looking forward to the next news that we get to bring to you, all you folks. Yardy har and stuff.
Yo ho
Thanks
ho.
everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Burn it down.